In the last episode, we saw the game's overseer being assigned to her proper position. At this point, she came to the realization that, to people, she wasn't all that powerful and unbeatable. When she saw the golden blood that emerged from this, her visage darkened, and she questioned whether someone had the audacity to touch her. As soon as it was apparent, she spun around to exact revenge. But the person behind her black scythe had already vanished from view. All RMC needed to do to make an appearance and surprise the angel was that split second. Grabbing one of her wings, Blackett. And the angel was instantly alarmed because she knew what was going to happen. Nonetheless, she persisted in screaming, demanding to know what this person was going to do to her, and pleading with him to stop. The only issue was that RMC broke the wings as if they were delicate, and he was incredibly cruel and uncaring toward her. The angel's immediate anguish nearly caused her to lose consciousness. And when the black scythe sliced into it even more, golden blood splattered everywhere. Have you ever seen an angel without wings? This is it. RMC shook her head and ordered her to quit being such a winner. Black scythe continued and took hold of another wing. The angel exclaimed, "All of the wings are done now," as he tugged this one again. Blackett remarked that she wouldn't be able to run after this. The angel was asked if this experience harmed her, and she responded in the affirmative, saying that it felt like a limb had been ripped out of her body. RMC went on to say that if her plan had succeeded, she would have been laughing all along in 5 more minutes when it would have been her asking these types of questions. The angel then attempted to refute these assertions, saying he had become too crazy. At that moment, Black Scythe disclosed the dagger concealed beneath the wings, claiming that the angel would have used it to stab him in the back. And RMC acknowledged her intentions after the angel became stunned, but she continued to attempt to negotiate her way out of the predicament. Then Blackside grinned and informed her that she didn't really have to lie because he could tell by the look on her face. He also referred to the angel as being buried. After becoming perplexed after hearing this reply, Burial asked RMC how he knew her name, to which he just replied that she really didn't need to know. He removed his recently obtained dagger from the storage area at the same moment. When Burial saw this, she became alarmed and questioned why RMC had suddenly pulled out his gun. She then threatened to use her expertise to blow RMC's head off, saying that all it would take was a snap of her fingers for everything to go wrong for him. However, Blackett was already aware that she could no longer utilize the mentioned skill because she had previously used it some time before, which is also why he gained confidence. She had no choice but to grit her teeth and go with the funeral. The only issue was that RMC was aware that all angels are egoists who don't care about other people's affairs, and that they wouldn't care whether one of them was killed or not. However, this angel didn't give up. She insisted that other angels would know if she was killed and that her allies would exact revenge on Black Scythe. RMC was going to put her to death, but she tried to talk him out of it by saying that doing this would not help him at all and that Blackett wouldn't be able to go home. However, as we have already mentioned, he already knew that all of these things were untrue. Regarding the last offer, the angel said she could provide Blackett with all the information he would need to complete each job, but Blackett didn't really need it because he had previously gone through each of the 99 items and was already mentally familiar with every detail. Furthermore, he could have just tortured her until she spat out all of her knowledge if he had wanted information. Following that declaration, the dagger on RMC's hand struck the angel squarely in the chest, sending her into a state of shock. This is a direct warning that people should exercise extreme caution since they might make mistakes by choosing the incorrect person. As soon as the dagger was removed from her body, Burial dropped to the ground. After that, a system notice revealed that RMC had successfully fought an angel. He was also the first player to accomplish this, and as a reward, he was given the title of the first Angel Slayer. Moreover, two objects appeared on his hands. The red rune was known as the Rune of the Slaughterer, while the other was named Angel's Blood. Black Scythe applied the rune right away, leaving a mark on his flesh. Returning to the title of being the first Angel Slayer, this had the effect of doubling all of the player's stats. RMC then recalled that, during his 13th regression, he had first learned about the benefits of killing angels when he exacted revenge on one of them, at which point the items appeared. Regarding the Butcher rune, also called the Rune of Slaughterer, its function was to enhance all stats by 1% each time a target was slain, up to a maximum of 100%. Black Scythe grinned as he examined his rewards, realizing that each was already on par with a special item. He reasoned that the other angels would have been surprised to learn that he had already obtained another rune. His attitude abruptly changed when he realized there was one more reason why he had slain the buried. And that was to obtain this object, which was the blood of an angel that was encased in golden light. It's a consumable item that can transform a user into a Reaper. The player must be at least a particular level to utilize it. There are 30 various classes in this game, and switching between them is easy. All players can acquire a class at level 10. All that was required of the players was to obtain a class-changing item, which is typically obtained by hunting or meeting easy requirements. However, there are always exceptions, such as when switching to a specific class that is only available to one player through particular conditions. The primary illustration of this was the player becoming a Reaper through the use of Angel's Blood. Naturally, unique classes are superior to standard classes in every way. These differences include bonus stat advancement, runes, skill compositions, and much more. Even though the first task wasn't even finished, RMC was incredibly relieved to get everything back. As he checked his status window, he used a unique award from being ranked top in every zone. These were the options he could acquire. And out of all of these options, the one that would enable him to switch classes the quickest to reach level 10 was all he required. And that was the 3-time experience bonus. The second mission will automatically apply this effect. This time, everything was going really well for Black Scythe, who then realized that this was his last chance to win the game by looking at the fallen angel. He was prepared to go to any lengths in order to strengthen himself in order to accomplish this. After a short while, the mission's first phase came to a conclusion. There were over 900 million survivors overall throughout all regions, with about 5,000 of those being inside the RMC zone. This announcement also disclosed that the next mission will take place on February 1st, 2023, and that they will now be returned to their original body in the other realm. White Guys gasped for breath as he emerged from his profound sleep. He quickly glanced around, thinking he had just fallen asleep during the New Year bell ceremony in the midst of the city. His expression turned confused as he processed what had transpired, thinking only that he had had this strange dream. This applied to every other individual in that vicinity as well. Iman discovered that it was already 52 a.m. when he checked his phone. In his dream, the same amount of time passed. His friends were beginning to awaken as well, and they were complaining of the same headache and physical aches. After exchanging information, these guys were able to confirm that everyone had experienced the same dream. Additionally, they were in a panic, wondering why all of these things were happening to them. For the time being, all they could determine was that this was not a dream. As more and more individuals become aware of this, they began to question if February 1st would mark their reappearance in another reality. However, as time went on, several of them also became aware that those nearby were not waking up. Tesk, one of Yan's friends, was stationary. Then this guy went over to the friend and said his name. When TK's face was finally shown, it was already pallid, and it was clear that his body was dead. They attempted to deny this scenario to one another at this point. However, They began to tremble as soon as they understood it was all true. This individual reported to his friends that he could not feel Tashik's pulse, and that Tashik was not breathing. Y'all men was shocked to learn that their friend had passed away. They therefore concluded that perhaps he wouldn't be able to make it through the mission against the goblins again. Subsequently, the bald man turned to face the surroundings and saw that other people were still asleep. Since the individuals on the ground were now all corpses, the majority of the men became frightened. Fear gripped them as they realized that just half of them had made it through the assault. He could also see young males trembling and perspiring, as he felt that this was an absurd circumstance. Then it dawned on this gentleman that regardless of the people's status, whether they were born with a golden spoon in their mouth or not, they were now bound to live equally. The game had just silenced the protests of those who claimed that life was unfair. After attempting to calm his companions down, Wyman said that all they needed to worry about was making sure they could complete each mission, and that everything that occurred to them was the same, so they shouldn't feel particularly unfairly treated. His remarks made his buddies believe that he was a crazy bastard. The bald man sighed and explained to the young men that he was feeling nothing since he had just realized his dream of being a gangster. The others, on the other hand, still had other goals in mind. The man also saw that the young men were ignoring what he had to say since they were occupied with scouting out potential partners among the crowd. And it was none other than RMC. He was aware that his Aeon son was only a short distance away from them, but he was currently missing. The young man then came to the conclusion that perhaps his errand boy had not survived the expedition. He grinned, reasoning that this was only to be expected, as the boy was simply too weak and fragile to take on 100 goblins by himself. However, he noticed something else. The guys noticed a man with strange equipment slung over his shoulder. He questioned why this was happening, and where in the world he got those garish outfits. The moment he recognized one thing, he swallowed his saliva. A young man attained level 5, and all of his stat points were allocated to his strength or stat. The men considered employing the status pane similar to the one in the game. He finds it unbelievable that he can actually use this ability even when it's not in the game. When his friend tried to access theirs after hearing him talk about it, they experienced the identical startled expression on their faces. Those that made it out of the mission alive followed suit, reasoning that such things could also exist in the real world. White Guys took up one of the stones from the ground to verify this. He managed to smash the robust rock by clenching his fist. Seeing this image captivated him. It felt like he was still dreaming. And after a little while, his fascination evolved into something more sinister, saying that this was simply too amazing. Subsequently, every Korean news channel began reporting on this extraordinary occurrence, revealing that more than 10,000 citizens abruptly lost consciousness at the same time. A video clip illustrating the arrival of burial in the city was also displayed. Additionally, the moment when a man's skull suddenly exploded in front of them was captured on camera. And as the video went on, the aforementioned angel reached out to embrace the bystanders. The individuals abruptly fell asleep, and that was the next thing they knew. The majority of the collapsed civilians, according to police reports, were between the ages of 15 and 29. This phenomenon is also observed globally. Those who were left out of the game began to panic and post questions on social media, expressing confusion and even believing that the images were CGI. However, one person realized that what was going on would completely alter the course of events. The first mission had been completed, and more would soon follow. According to RMC, this is only the beginning, and that stories about deaths will continue to appear non-stop after just one night, in which 11% of the population passed away. While returning home, this man believed that the true issue still existed somewhere. The survivors of this strange occurrence were now referred to as players, and investigations were underway to determine what caused it. In addition, the powers of these players had been translated into reality. The fact that there isn't yet a player with a high enough stat to alter their reality is relieving. However, some of these players would level up over time and might even become transcendent beings. In such case, they would be unbeatable against other players with any contemporary weaponry. They will all soon be referred to as human weapons, and RMC had no intention of seeing the world fall apart. This guy only saw the necessity to control the players by employing overwhelming might. Otherwise, everything would break apart on their course, and the Earth would collapse even before the 20th round. RMC already had this overwhelming power with him in his 99th attempt, but the reason he failed was that he was fighting every battle by himself. He needed 4 more players to finish the final one. With a more determined expression, he believed he already had a few potential candidates in mind and considered ways to find them. Nevertheless, as the game has only recently begun, he wouldn't dare to act just yet because he believes there are still more pressing matters to attend to. I also neglected to mention that, in this reality, his name was Min, and we would now be addressing RMC by that name. Guys moved in the direction of this residential complex. Since this was his flat, he opened one of the rooms. And when he went inside, he saw something. It was a ramen cup that was empty. He asserted that this unhealthy food was consumed by a specific person. Once more, Min then opened a door and peered inside. A guy who resembled him was fast sleeping. Their hair was the only thing that separated them. Though he was still away from home, RMC grinned at the thought that his younger brother was able to sleep well. The man who was dozing off was Rian, RC's younger brother, who will shortly be entering his 3rd year of middle school. Their family was said to be typical, but that all changed when their parents died in a car accident, leaving the two of them as the only ones left for each other. Ryan was also compelled to take on the role of guardian for his younger brother at an early age. Rayuan had very obvious contusions and covered his entire body in bandages. And prior to his regression, RMC was unaware of these. Then he made the decision to start making changes, turning the lights back on G. Ryan welcomed his sibling and informed him that it was now time for him to awaken. When his younger brother looked at his phone later, he discovered that it was only 6 a.m. However, RMC pulled the mattress beneath him, so he wasn't actually getting back in bed. He said that they were pressed for time and that he would just clarify things as they were leaving. Ryuan asked his brother, still feeling sleepy, "What's the rationale behind all of these his?" Later, upon hearing his brother's words take on a more solemn tone, his demeanor shifted. This was due to the man's revelation that chaos now reigned over the earth. Regarding Ryuan, all he was aware of was that his brother had gone to witness the New Year's Bell celebration. When he inquired about whether anything had happened, RMC advised him to go outside first, and it would tell him everything as they strolled. These two were now strolling down the street a short while later. Ryan fixed his full gaze on his brother, wondering if something had gone wrong. This was one of the few occasions when his brother appeared serious. Then RMC said that one truly had no idea what was going on in the globe at the moment. One was more piqued by this comment and inquired as to if anything had occurred while he was asleep. Then Nin gave him the order to get out his phone and view the top search results. This man actually pulled out his phone, following in the footsteps of his older brother. After reading the papers, he was corrected by RMC, who said that it was more accurate to say that an angel appeared and abducted citizens to another realm. Then, one was shocked to learn that his brother had been among the men dragged away, and he also learned that RMC had only lived because he had managed to kill 100 goblins. One was going to inquire as to his brother's well-being when RMC interrupted, telling him not to worry. This one then cried out, unable to simply put his brother's concerns to rest. Everything changed the moment their parents passed away. First of all, his older brother was the only family he had, and his elder brother assumed full responsibilities even while they were still in mourning. You guys needed to be powerful in order to live. And up until this point, the only person he knew that developed into the strongest mentally powerful person ever was his older brother. Even yet, he was unable to accept that his brother had actually killed 100 goblins. Instead, he assumed that he had a weakness of his own. Then, as RMC already knew what his younger brother was thinking, he broke the stream of thought. Ryan said that he was unsure of his physical prowess, and that he got strong enough to complete the objective because the game had statistics that enhanced their talents. Additionally, he asserted that all of Ryan's reservations will go when Ryan realized what he was about to accomplish. However, the younger brother's concern persisted, and he eventually stopped walking and declared that he would not follow RMC until he told him where they were going. His look becoming increasingly urgent, he asked to know this information first. Then, the bruises that these bandages were intended to conceal became more noticeable. RMC was remembering something from the past with an expressionless look on his face. When Ryuan heard him say the word Bangu, he was taken aback. With this look, Ryuan turned around and indicated that they were going to Bang Ted's hideout, which is the same location where the head delinquent for Ryan's class was residing. At last, RMC acknowledged that he was aware of his younger brother's bullying. Ryan became alarmed since he didn't think he would find out. He made every effort to conceal it from him. This was due to his desire to save his older brother, who was already going through a difficult period, any more stress. But Riemann bears the majority of the blame because he allowed this to happen and was often apologizing to his younger brother. His previous self was too preoccupied with being bullied and balancing his academics and job at the same time for him to truly be aware that this was happening. When RMC returned from his first round, he was devastated from his fight with the goblins and had spent the day resting before he found out the truth. Ryuan left the house that day to go somewhere. RMC was suddenly aware of his phone buzzing constantly. Reluctantly, he stood up to answer the call, which concerned Ryuan. When the person on the other end of the call advised her to head to the hospital right away, his eyes widened in shock. He hurried that same day after learning that his brother had been involved in an incident. Ryuan survived the beating he received from Taya, but was already blind when he returned home. That day had been regrettable for RMC, who blamed himself for being too foolish and helpless to defend his one and only family in this world. However, since his regression, he has altered Ryan's destiny and preserved him in every possible timeline, making good on his vow that no one would ever be able to harm him once more. Meanwhile, at a deserted factory close to their area, someone was being assaulted. A person with blonde hair asserted that none of the three people standing in front of him brought him 200,000 each, and they were in too much pain for them to even muster the strength to explain why. This led to the individual carrying on with his previous actions. 3 other men were simply standing there, seeing their friend teach them some lessons. They believed Tai to be far too cruel. According to someone, they shouldn't irritate him because even the students in higher grades dared not to mess with him. After that, Tayo said, "These guys are all useless because they didn't comply with my request." The money he had anticipated receiving from them was then used to purchase a motorcycle that he had been wanting for a while. He then went over to the other 3 and inquired as to if they knew of any means to obtain money. These individuals then began to brainstorm, but it would be very challenging to provide a simple means of obtaining money. Till this man had an idea. He then advised Tayo to ask his tall, curly-haired personal Aeon lad for some money. Taya then grinned as he recalled that Run had said he was going to phone in today because he would be spending the new year with him. Then, These individuals made fun of Taya and said that he could just rob him without thinking. Yet Taya disclosed that Ren was essentially homeless. Even if he beat him up, his errand boy wouldn't be able to bring him any money, he said. His home appeared dilapidated as well. After learning about the scenario, these three felt rather let down, especially after learning that Rayuan was no longer even related to his parents. Taya went on to say that the boy's older brother was the only family that they knew. However, Taya abruptly stopped speaking and stared at something. It appears that Rayuan and RMC have reached this deserted storehouse at last. Realizing there's really nothing to fear, especially with Ryan around, Taya grinned. Then he went up to Rayuan and said that they were only talking about him at the moment. However, this guy's attitude quickly shifted, and he attempted to intimidate Rayuan. This man then instantly expressed regret, with his elder brother standing next to him. Taya became aware of RMC's presence and questioned who he was, feeling that his face was a little bothersome. He turned to face Rayuan and said, "Who is this person he came with?" but was unable to give a direct response, since he was a little afraid of Taya. Then RMC spoke, identifying himself as Ryan's elder brother. When Rayuan expressly threatened to turn on Taya, the former became irate and threatened to teach his older brother a lesson as well. The obese man then glanced at one of his goons. These three strolled right up to RMC's direction. They questioned him about his fighting prowess, and Ryan just stood there and waited for them to get closer. He was even made fun of by one of them for being somewhat shorter than his younger sibling. Nonetheless, this came to an abrupt halt as the man struck Ruan's fist. The other guys were shocked to learn that their friend had been vanquished with just one blow. This one charged through in an attempt to exact revenge. The only issue was that his attacks would never appear. RMC launched a clean counterattack after growing tired of it. Then the thug was launched in the direction of these metal drums. Regarding the other, he also attempted to charge in. But, as was to be expected, he took a swift blow to the face. Now that they were on the ground, the three minions were having difficulty standing up. Taya, meanwhile, was still grinning sinisterly and said that this scene was too ridiculous. Though he believed Rayuan had picked up some boxing techniques, he wasn't sure if that would be sufficient to defeat him. He then moved in their direction and gave them kudos for Ruman's use of boxing techniques to defeat his goons. However, as he faced RMC, this one said that it appeared he had forgotten how crucial physicality is in boxing. Ryan simply grinned, realizing that the individual in front of him was still unaware of the recent global events. Taya became inquisitive and inquired about it, but Ruman simply laughed it off. This person became enraged as his query was disregarded, and he then lunged a punch at RMC. And as usual, there is no way that a guy like him will be struck by these standard punches. Taya kept hitting him, but the more he tried to hit him, the more irritated he became. His eyes were growing fuzzy from the fatigue he was experiencing. He was unable to even land a single punch, leaving him wondering what was going on. All of his fists missed their target. Regarding RMC, he punched out a fistful of blue AA and said, "If Taya had been watching the news, he wouldn't dare fight against him." After saying that, Ryan punched Fatso in the face once more. Kids, you should never bully someone unless you want to face these kinds of consequences. Taya's bulky size didn't stop RMC from propelling him back a few meters. However, it seemed insufficient to render this man unconscious. Then, Taya hurried over to confront Ryan with his counterattack. But the punch was delivered in this empty area, and he missed everything. This man was wondering where his target had disappeared when a bright light suddenly reappeared at the side of his face. He was hit with another punch and was unable to respond. Despite the fact that Taya was obviously at a disadvantage, he continued to assert that RMC is no match for him. After attempting to stem the blood from his mouth, his tooth finally dropped out. This infuriated him, and he yelled that he would ensure that he killed Rumen. The fatso attempted to land another blow, but it was easily sidestepped. Then RMC took hold of his hand and moved it in a different direction. Taya lost his balance as a result, opening himself up to more blows. And the other boys Taya was bullying were watching while all of this was going on. Then, this gentleman wondered if it was possible that Rumen was intentionally hitting his face. He noticed his opponent's arrogant and self-assured expression. Now Taya was hoping to hit this guy even just once. He hurried back over to confront Rumen, who was already suffering as he said, "Please!" But then a strong kick was delivered. Taya was hurled in the direction of the wall. This person was already at his limit. He lacked the endurance to continue the fight, and the blows he was taking were difficult to endure. With a look of fear and anxiety, RMC inquired as to the bully's emotional state. Even with all the regressions he had experienced over the years, Ryuan could never forget the day he witnessed his younger brother become blind. The fatso was now requesting that our unseen stay away from him. He held Ryan's neck back from another kick and begged him to stop. However, RMC only held his hand, leaving Taya perplexed. Lincoln grinned, but his eyes were now full of terror as he cried out, "This is the exact same reason he shouldn't have messed with his little brother." After that sentence, there was an abrupt stab of pain that caused the man to only gaze at it. A few seconds later, the pain eventually reached his brain, causing him to scream aloud and realize that several of his fingers were now fractured. And RMC took hold of his other hand, as he continued to weep for the ones that were broken. Tao yelled, "No," several times, his eyes full of horror. Tai's henchmen fled when they saw this kind of incident. They were aware that staying would put them in far more danger. Because he didn't want to watch what his brother was doing to Taiyu, Ryuan also turned around. I believe that this was more than enough of a lesson for today. Taiyu was already regretting his choices in life when all of his fingers shattered today. RMC warned this person again if he would meddle with his younger brother. Even though he still has that eerie smile on his face, seeing him confirm it made Ryan smile. He then took hold of Taya's other arm and shattered it again, saying that he wanted to be sure in case this fat person decided to exact revenge. Then, there was a tremendous scream that rang out over the neighborhood. Following their interaction with Taya, the two brothers departed the scene with a carefree demeanor. Ryuan questioned his elder brother about how he had accomplished it, wondering whether he had studied martial arts or something. However, RMC refuted this, saying that since he became a player, the metrics could still be utilized to improve one's skills in real life. Then Ryman attempted some summarizing the weapon he received previous round in order to truly get his brother to accept it. A golden bright light gradually materialized. Ryuan was taken aback when a dagger actually appeared, seeming dark and pointy. Now this guy was grinning in astonishment. Ryan also mentioned that all players might use this method to summon their weapons. At that point, Ryuan recognized that his brother was moving too quickly for the same reason. He wasn't even having trouble avoiding all of those attacks. RMC disclosed that he had a dex stat of about 11, although average individuals only had about 3 and athletes have about 10. This allowed him to maneuver in such a way. After Ryuan questioned RMC about what happens after his sibling gains more level, he pretended not to know anything because he hadn't reached that stage yet. Because of what transpired in his earlier transgression, this individual was now willing to lie about this knowledge. When he was 11, he told his younger brother that he was a regressor and that Ryuan was in danger as a result. He was abducted by some players in order to take control of RMC. He didn't want Ryuan to go through that type of trauma again, even though he was able to save him at that particular moment. As Ryan looked at his brother, he realized that he needed to get more ready to defend him from other players. He asked the man if he wanted to eat breakfast at the convenience shop to start things off. Ryuan happily accepted the offer, and the two entered the QS24 store. As he was moving in a different route, the younger brother pointed out to Ruman that the cup noodles were in that direction and grabbed his attention. Nonetheless, RMC went to the ATM to take out some cash beforehand. He believed that this was all he had saved up to this point as he was clicking the buttons. 133,134 was the total amount. Something afterwards. He asked Ryuan what he would like to eat in the interim. Because every meal in this place is pricey, the man was hesitant to share his preferences, but his older brother reassured him that he could have whatever he wanted. Ryan was trying to make up for the fact that all he had for dinner the previous night was a cup of noodles, and even then, he was still hesitant since they might run out of money for the next few days. Ryuan mentioned that he had been wanting to eat this cold pork belly for a while after everything had been resolved. And it was clearly evident how happy he was. After telling Ryuan that they should order and eat Hanu beef sometime, our MC grinned. Ryuan was uncomfortable again after hearing this, so he assured his older brother that this chili pork belly was more than plenty for him. Meanwhile, in this guy's imagination, they could already be able to eat anything they want in a few more days. After a short while, the two were enjoying their breakfast, and the pork belly was particularly appealing. Ryuan then had his initial mouthful. The taste was so good that it lit up his face. And as they were eating, Ryuan got up and informed his younger brother that he only had a crucial task to complete. Ryuan simply looked at his brother, curious as to where he was headed. RMC returned a short while later with this ballpoint pen. Ryuan was shocked to discover that his brother had recently purchased numerous tickets for NATO. They used all of their leftover funds to purchase 20 tickets. The younger brother was taken aback by the realization that that would equal 100,000. However, RMC ordered Ryuan to wait and see, as he kept checking every number he could recall as this man was in a panic. Ryuan became even more perplexed upon witnessing his brother's actions with the tickets. RMC simply chose the same numbers repeatedly. He then grinned and said that these were the winning numbers, which was why he had taken this action. I would undoubtedly act in the same way if I were a regression. Later that night, the two were back to their apartment. Ryuan was glued to his phone as he was watching the in or draw for that day. This guy was even biting his nails, because he was too nervous. He thought that they may have just wasted 100,000 won. The drawing of numbers then started. Ryuan scolded his younger brother about this habit. But as the host announced the lucky numbers, Ryuan stopped. The first number was 3, then 8. The third number is 9, then 38. All of the numbers were the same ones that his brother had picked a while ago. And after a few more seconds, the screen had shown all the final 6 lucky numbers. They were 3, 18, 99, 38, 21, and 1. RMC didn't even need the bonus number because all of the first 6 were correct. Ryuan then explained that this thing was insane. He can't believe that his brother was indeed right about taking some in tickets. His eyes were slowly being filled with tears. He even asked his brother to pinch him because he thought this was just a dream. But RMC just smiled at his brother and confirmed that this was all real. Ruman then teased him and asked if he would prefer this thing to be just a dream. A few more confirmations were needed to really make Ryan believe it. He then stood up and raised the tickets that they bought. He shouted at the top of his lungs as he was just too happy. But his celebration was cut short as RMC advised him to keep quiet. Their neighbors might hear him. Human was just too happy to see his younger brother like this. He thought that he had the same reaction the first time he had bought the end tickets. He also screamed and celebrated the whole night. But as he regressed over and over again, this became the kind of annual event that he was obliged to do this was all because he would eventually need a lot of money. Having the population cut off to 90% in just one night had really affected the economy of all the countries all over the world. And soon item trade between players will also become available, which will all be done with a cash basis. Ryuan then asked his brother how much money they would get after exchanging all the tickets, and it was answered with an unsure response. All RMC cared about was this amount of money will be enough for them to shake the world. The next day Ryan went in front of the No-High-Up Bank building. Since he had done this a lot of times, him walking towards the teller didn't make him nervous at all. He then approached this individual and casually told him that he came in here to collect the North first place price. Hearing this statement immediately made this guy congratulate RMC. But as he stared at Ruman even further, he thought that this guy looked like a high school student. He then asked RMC about the store where he purchased the ticket, and he answered it by saying QS24 Youngweed branch. His answer made this guy startled. He then remembered what his colleague had shared to him about the number of tickets that had won this round. There were 115 of them. This guy claimed that what made it even crazier was that all 100 tickets were bought inside one store. He then got the idea that only one person had bought all of the tickets that day. Regardless of the circumstance, he was advised that whoever would claim the winnings from this store, he or she should be treated like a VIP. This guy was then cut off by RMC as he was seen lost in his thoughts. He quickly apologized and asked for Ruman to just wait for a while. A few moments later another person came in, and he greeted RMC. He introduced himself as Guan Juno, the president of the Namgia Bank. The president of the bank personally greeted RMC because he was the one who won multiple NATO tickets. He also congratulated him in the process. Ryan was then invited towards another place more quiet and was asked to follow the president. President Juno led him towards this room where the lottery ticket business team were placed. They entered the room and were greeted by a lady immediately. This one wondered who this guy was beside the president. She thought that maybe he was his son. But her question was immediately answered as the president introduced Ruman as one of their VIP who came in to claim his prize. He also told the lady that she should make him comfortable at all costs. The employee got more nervous upon learning that this guy just won 100 in tickets in one go. She then composed herself and decided to stay calm. After that, she offered Ruman to sit first. She also asked him if he wanted to drink anything, but all RMC won was to get his winning prize right away. As part of the process, she will be confirming the end tickets first. Ryan quickly handed her the tickets. There were really a lot of them. And while inspecting them, this lady couldn't help but think that this was too absurd. This was the very first time she had encountered anything like this. She even thinks that maybe this guy could see the future. After a few moments, she validated them and told RMC that they were all real. Ryan then asked her how much he would be receiving, and just thinking about the number made her freeze. RMC patiently waited for her response. And it was revealed to be roughly 22.5 billion won, that's over $16 million, a perfect example of rags to riches folks. After taxes, RMC was able to take home a whopping 15 billion won. Everything happened quickly after he had collected his reward. Ryan got busy buying a new place for them to live in. That evening he also opened a stock trading account. Around this time of the year, coin was expected to go up by 500%, so he planned on investing in stocks after increasing his money with Bitcoin. A few days after these two have already talked about their future plans, Ryuan saw some pictures of their new house. He claimed that he only saw this kind of big and expensive houses in photos. But one thing has bugged Ryuan, and that was the fact his brother preferred to just rent this house instead of buying it, even though they have more than to pay it in cash. It was then revealed to him that they didn't have any money anymore. His ever so intelligent and wise older brother has invested everything to Bitcoin. He allowed all 14 million. Ruman was part of the Deacons. and that statement made his brother act like a cartoon character. He froze and was not able to respond to anything. Ryan then assured him that he just had to trust him, as he already knew some things. This guy also prepared some kind of backup plan in case things went south. He revealed that he still has 4 sets of numbers that he saw in his dream, and he could just buy tickets again. Ryan's eyes glittered as he realized that he had only seen people dreaming about lucky numbers on TV. He didn't even think they were true. He then shook his older brother and told him not to forget those numbers at all cost. In Ryan's mind, he couldn't forget those numbers even if he wanted to, because he had already done this multiple times. After that, this older brother told Rayuan that they should now go to lunch and be ready to leave. This confused him and asked Rumen where they would be going. This guy then smiled and revealed that today was the day they will be moving in. Meanwhile, somewhere in this random place, a punch just landed on a wall. It's so powerful that it even created cracks all over the point of impact. This attack was from Young Min. He smiled as he thought that putting all of his stat points in strength was really the best choice. On top of that, the rune that he got from the angel was the rune of strength. This allowed him to have his strength stat to be doubled in value, resulting on him having this kind of power. As he stared at the cracks that he made on the wall, he thought that even Mike Tyson would be jealous after seeing a punch this strong. Young Min grew more ecstatic as he thought that he should try using his newfound power in an actual fight. Later that day, Ryan's residence was knocked on by the guy who wanted to become a thug. Young Min was already getting irritated since his calls were not being returned and he was not being seen. He then recalled the evening he saw Rayuan prior to the New Year celebration and believed he would really never let this issue go, especially since RMC gazed at him like he was just a fly. His instinct told him that his errant baby was still alive. As he thought back on that recollection, his rage increased, and he declared that he would kill him right then and there. He reasoned that even if Rayuan turned into a player, the cowardly errand boy would still be frail and in need of a lesson. Young Min assumed that RMC would instinctively hide inside his home, but despite these forceful knocks, nobody responded. He halted abruptly as he came up with a strategy. He deliberately said that he would leave for the time being since Ryan wasn't inside, as he leaned in the direction of the door. Young Min was now prepared to demolish the door right away, and was only waiting to hear a single breath coming from within. However, an elderly guy suddenly caught his eye and asked him what he was doing in front of his neighbor's door. This person asked the elderly man why he would care, acting rather aggressive. The men questioned whether the elderly man was the landlord or someone else. And after that, this person verified that he was, in fact. After obtaining a convenient alibi, the landlord, an elderly guy, asked the young man if he was there to meet a buddy. He accepted and pretended to be RMCC's friend. A couple of young males even requested that the landlord open the door for them. For some reason, he was unable to get in touch with his friend and decided to come in to see what had occurred. However, the elderly man later disclosed that Young Min were just abandoned by his companion. The owner also mentioned that a student who had previously resided there had moved somewhere, but he had no idea where. The room was now unoccupied. The young men became even more enraged at this kind of situation, believing that Rayuan fled without saying anything. Meanwhile, they were talking about standing in front of this classy, tall tower. Rayuan said that it was simply too tall. When they used a spinning door to enter the building, this guy even expressed amazement. Additionally, he observed his elder brother receiving the unique access passes provided to the building's proprietors. His astonishment intensified upon witnessing a security guard authenticate their identity. After all, this was his first time. As they entered the elevator, Ryan continued, "This place is just too amazing." The 43rd story of the building was the location they will now call home. When these two arrived, they were welcomed by this roomy area. Additionally, everything within was brand new. Additionally, Ryuan discovered that this location was above 330 square meters. Ryuan remarked that after exploring every inch of the space, it might be too large for the two of them. The agreement for the property required 500 million won in down payment and 22 million won monthly, which amounted to more than $166,000. And Ryuan lost all courage upon hearing this, since he was reminded of the moment when they were already fretting over maybe having to spend $5,000 at a convenience store. The younger brother then advised them to simply purchase a much smaller home. RMC, however, disagreed, saying that the better the security, that's all that matters, and the more they spend, the better. Now, and that's because users experience narcolepsy on the first of every month, which makes this the most vulnerable moment for all players. Natural catastrophes would pose a serious risk. Additionally, there have been cases where other players have hired assassins, so when the time comes, gamers need to be in a particularly safe spot. Ryan was aware that if a person dies in real life, everything will end regardless of how strong they are in the game. Ryan asked his younger brother if he truly appreciated being here after looking over every area of the house, and he replied in the affirmative. After that, RMC said that he was glad Ryuan enjoyed it, but as he studied his older brother's expression, Ryan had an epiphany. Then, concern showed on his face, and he fell silent. After a few while, this man abruptly apologized to RMC. And the reason for it was that he felt bad for his older brother, who was here taking advantage of everything that life had to offer, risking his life on the first day of every month. However, Ryan quickly tapped his shoulder, saying that this pessimistic outlook wasn't really necessary for today. Then he gave him the reassurance that Ryuan should not be depressed because he would undoubtedly return each time. And to decontaminate the air, RMC asked his brother to dinner at the second-floor Korean restaurant. As he waited for Ryuan, RMCC checked his phone. He observed that young men had finally come to realize that he had already relocated. Additionally, he made the decision to reject his calls since, although they would never cross paths in the real world again, their fates would still collide in the hereafter. Ryan was still yawning the day after moving in when he left his room. Then he witnessed his younger brother getting dressed to leave. This man disclosed that he had just placed an order for some rice or cakes, and would be picking them up. Ruan's remark perplexed RMC as to why rice cakes. Regressing didn't guarantee that everything would go as planned, but it was still an interesting occasion, so Ruman questioned his younger brother about why he had purchased some rice cakes. And it was discovered that Ryuan intended to offer it to their new neighbors. This was a typical Korean courtesy. Ryuan received praise for his astute observation that being a good neighbor was actually not a bad notion, according to RMC. Ryuan was ready to go when RMC proposed that they go together and distribute the rice cakes. Then, without warning, the two of them began ringing their neighbors' doorbells. They also gave them a brief introduction and smiled warmly to greet them. This elderly neighbor was the first to open up. She saw right away that these two were siblings because of how similar they appeared. After that, the rice cakes were given. This marked the beginning of their excellent neighbor connections. Ryan exhibited polite behavior toward the strangers in front of him. This deed then persisted for some time. Ryuan would always have a smile on her face while she handled the rice cakes. And RMC experienced the same thing. Even more graciously, this child took the rice cake with grace. There was just one spot remaining after a while, and it was on the 44th floor. These two were anxious to get everything done so they could go to bed. Then, as they were making their way to the final neighbor, RMC revealed that the owner of the floor had purchased both the 44th and the 45th, indicating that they were at least extremely wealthy. When RMC attempted to recall the specifics, all he could think of was that the resident was a famous person. When Ryan rang the doorbell and nobody answered, He reasoned that perhaps they weren't inside. Considering they were already here, trying again wouldn't be detrimental. However, Ryuan gave up after a few more seconds. He was about to advise them to simply return to their home when he became aware of something. This man noticed someone who was approaching them. The woman that the two brothers saw was none other than Siren, who was regarded as one of the most gorgeous actresses in the nation and the most well-known celebrity in her career at the time. Thanks for watching and have a great day.